Well, 2024 has been and gone on. We're in a new year, and that means it's time we look back at the movies that was released in the previous year. Now, for the most part, I'd say that 2024 was a really good year when it comes to films. I know there's many people that aren't huge on this year for films, but honestly, when films were great this year, these were fantastic. In fact, that's the reason why I extended my top 10 into a top 20. But before we take a look at those 20 films that are amazing, we've got to look into 10 films that, when they were bad, they were hard to sieve. Believe me, this was a year when films were bad, and they were some of the worst films that were released in the decade so far, maybe of the century. I'm Charlie Lipinski, and welcome to the top 10 worst movies of 2024. Number 10, The Union. Now, Netflix has had a pretty bad year when it comes to their movies, and this isn't the only one of their films that's on the list. Yes, we've got at least another 2 more of their films on this list. However, out of all of them, The Union is probably the most forgettable. Oh, it's just a typical little action flick with not much that's really going on. The story's pretty bland and predictable, or as it follows a similar action if these types of movies would have, and the characters don't have much to be invested with. Granted, the visuals are okay for what the film's trying to deliver, but it's not enough to get you invested. At most, for positives, I guess the action was pretty good. There were a few moments, especially the end, that did get a bit intense. But they come so late in the feature where you're pretty much bored of everything and ready to move on to the next thing. Not to mention that the lead actors don't seem to have much chemistry with one another. Like, they deliver good performances on their own, but I feel like it's definitely the case where they could have been much better. It's definitely far from Netflix's worst film of the year. I don't think I'll be uniting with this union anytime soon. Number 9. A tie between The Fundamental Returns and No Time to Spy, a Loud House movie. That's right, I'm 2 Nickelodeon movies together that were released on Paramount Plus. And these aren't even the worst Nickelodeon films of the year. Yeah, we'll get to that one soon enough. But for now, let's take a look at these two. And let me just say that, man, and these are pretty disappointing. Starting with The Fundamental Returns, and my biggest problem with it is that it doesn't feel like a movie, but rather for one of those 45-minute specials that were extended to over an hour, even complete with audience interaction and laugh track. Honestly, I don't get why they put this in, and it makes it feel less of a movie. And more of an extended episode. So, and it wasn't even that great to see the return of the characters. Now, I've watched The Fundamentals a few times when I was younger, not much, but I don't. But man, seeing them again just didn't feel strong, especially with that family dynamic. Where it was a lot weaker than it in the show. As for No Time to Spy, a Loud House movie, I'll admit, it it's not the worst thing to come from Nickelodeon. As a Loud House film, it's definitely the worst one. But I do see what they were trying to do, to going for a more spy angle, and the animation is quite decent. However, the story is so predictable, and the characters aren't that likable, especially with Lincoln. When they make him more unlikable than and they did with if the Loud House movie. Well, these two are probably not the worst ones you'll get from Nickelodeon. I don't think I'll return to these ones no time soon. Number 8, Imaginary. I don't know what's crazy, Asia. The fact that we've got a horror movie pretty high up on the list, despite how bad it is also the fact, and that we had 2 films about imaginary friends this year. Other than Imaginary, we had If, which that one was pretty good, not gonna lie. With Imaginary, however, I don't really get what the imagination angle was put into this film. The story seems pretty bland, and it had so much potential. This is basically Chucky with a toy teddy bear. And the opportunity to tease are endless, and could have at least led to a pretty fun film. In fact, since this is done by Blumhouse, we could have had something as enjoyable as Megan. That one took advantage of its crazy concept and just had fun with it. But alas, that's not what we got with Imaginary. On top of the story being pretty dull, there's very much of a horror aspect to it, where most of the scares feel quite tame. Not only that, but the characters are so dull. I forgot everything about them quite quickly, as they barely had much of a personality. I guess the visuals were alright for what they were trying to do, especially near the angle we went into this imaginary world. But they aren't really interesting and kind of dull for the type of film this is trying to be. There was a lot of potential with this film, but I think the filmmakers needed to put in a bit more imagination into chance on this horror adventure. Number 7, The Beekeeper. Now, I'll admit, I could have been too harsh on this movie. This is one that I haven't had a chance to rewatch, but do you think I could have been a bit too hard on this film? That being said, this film's an absolute mess. The story is quite dull and interesting. In fact, it barely feels like there's a story that exists. It's not to mention that the characters have barely any depth to them. With Jason Statham's character, I get his motivation, but they pretty much glance over it in a little amount of time. Where his revenge doesn't feel that strong or deserving. That ending, yeah, I didn't like that ending too much. In fact, that was easily the weakest moment of the feature, and the part that dragged it down for me. By a lot. Safe to say, this film had very little to go for it. Granted, the visuals are alright, and they were pretty decent, on top of some action being okay. but that was barely enough to make this movie worthwhile for me. A, 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 while the Beekeeper did try its best, it only ended up as a film that left a big sting. Number 6, Saving Bikini Bottom, the Sandy Cheeks movie. Isn't it? Now, when it comes to SpongeBob films, they're usually not that bad. And in fact, I find them to be pretty good. But especially with the first two being really fun and entertaining. And putting the focus on Sandy Cheeks isn't a bad idea. That being said, what went wrong with this? It felt so easy to make a Sandy Cheeks movie, and the film completely baffled it up. The story is very dull and unpredictable, but as well as being quite hard to get invested with, the characters does only show their one specific trait, and the animation, while okay on its own, when blended with the live action, is hard to watch. And the villain, well, the CG on her is quite atrocious, to put it nicely. But there is one thing that could have salvaged this movie. One where, even if it didn't turn out to be the best of the year, it could have been quite decent. And that is if the film was funny. If the comedy was at least good enough to make this film enjoyable, then I'm sure I wouldn't be complaining. And while there were a few jokes that were okay, for the most part, the humour was absolutely bad. I made this film more annoying than it did. Sandy might have been able to save Bikini Bottom, but if only she could have saved this movie as well. Number 5, Kraven the Hunter. Now, when it comes to Sony, the Spider-Man Marvel Cinematic Universe, I admit, it's one that I do see the potential. Like, focusing on different villains within the Spider-Man universe, after giving them their own feature, as well as different spider heroes, not a bad idea. Yeah, but they really baffled it up, and that especially goes to Kraven. In fact, I don't think I remember much or anything that happened within this film. The story was very bland and very forgettable, or with barely anything that's going on. The characters are quite unlikable, or with barely any traits to enjoy them by. There are some okay visual effects. When they got bad, they're pretty bad. It also leads into the worst CG and action that I've seen in a superhero movie. And when you mess up the action scenes in a superhero movie, that's when you know you've done something wrong. I guess as one positive I could say is that the actors were at least trying to give the best they could. But that was barely enough to salvage this movie for me. Kraven might be a good hunter, but his adventure only left me craving a better movie. Number 4, the Mean Girls musical film. Seeing as Mean Girls turned 20 in 2024, it only makes sense that Paramount would want to make a remake of this. And not just any remake, but create the musical on stage, and turn it into a film. So what could go wrong? Oh, you have no idea. Yeah. First, as when you take the musical or elements out, there's barely any difference is between in this film and the original 2004 feature. Now, X, what the characters still try to keep their traits, as they feel a lot more unlikable, and they're like it's trying to fit with the new modern times. But then you have the songs themselves. Now, visually, these moments are pretty good. And I will say, from a visual standpoint, they're pretty good. And in fact, if you listen to them outside of the feature, they aren't that bad and quite decent. But when they're in the feature, they're kind of concerning. Like, I won't say any that are absolutely horrendous to listen to. But most of these songs rather weaken the feature than they do improve it. And while the visuals can be okay in these moments, there are times where they can go way too far, especially with how it changes the aspect ratio for some of the songs, and how they can get a bit too intense with the lighting. I think the best way to describe this film, it's like the mean Ghosts themselves. They might look pretty on the surface, but there's a lot of meanness inside that makes them feel them seem like a bunch of losers. Number 3, Madam Web. Now, here's the worst thing about this movie. Yes, I don't think there would be any fact of changing this movie, man. Like, it would easily find its way to be somewhere on the worst list for sure. But here's what the worst thing. I could have seen how this movie could have been so bad it's good. Like, yeah, the story and writing thing is an absolute joke. But some of the dialogue is so hilariously bad, you can't help but laugh. The characters are quite flat with dull performances. But you can't help but be entertained with how bad and how flat they are delivered. But are there some plot points that don't make sense? Of course there are. But they come so much out of nowhere. That only tries to leave a smile. Granted, not like a proper smile, but like enough to say, hey, you're having an entertainingly bad time with this. But then there are the visuals, and I think this is the one thing that stopped this one from being so bad it's good. Because, oh boy, the camera and effects. With the effects, they are like pretty bad. Like they jump from one point to another, to a point where they make the film feel unwatchable, or not to mention with the camera always moving on the go with some action scenes, especially in the climax, where it's hard to keep your focus on what's actually going on. This could have easily been a so bad it's good movie. Somewhere I could have easily put it on the worst list, but probably not somewhere in the middle, like somewhere between like the Beekeeper and Safe in Bikini Bottom. But it was the visuals that messed this film up and stopped it from getting any higher. Madam Web might be able to see the future, but only she was able to predict the disaster that are laid in front of her. Number 2, Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate. Okay, I do get why many people would call this to be their worst movie of 2024. I'll admit it was close to that for me, but there was one film that I found to be worse. But before we get into that one, let's explain why I think Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate is terrible. Basically, if you like the first Megamind, you're not gonna find anything good out of this film whatsoever. First of all, the animation. Now, I do get that as this is lower quality, the animation wouldn't be that great. Like the improvement, it wouldn't be anywhere near the levels of the 2010 film. However, it's probably not the worst animation I've ever seen, but it is quite stiff and sometimes pretty hard to watch. I with how bad it looks. Next, the writing thing. Also, the thing to that have worked on the original, haven't watched the original, to prepare for this, especially with how they handle some of the characters estimate, especially with Megamind, where he does not feel like the one from the first film. Even the action feels flat. Like, they could have been decent. I get that if the animation was better, so that these moments could have been quite decent. But there barely seems to be much excitement or interest put into these moments. And any new elements like the Doom Syndicate feel like they come out of nowhere. And leave more questions than they do answers. Now that, and here's the worst part of the feature. The film is so terrible, but the series that follows this Megamind rules isn't too bad. Like, it's not a good series, but I'd say it's more on the levels of meh. It could have been much worse. Yeah, there are things that the series did do that was pretty bad, especially with those last few episodes. This is a series that was overall okay, but it only made the film look much worse in comparison. And resulted in a sequel that was pretty much doomed from the start. Now, before we get into my number 1 worst film of the year, let's take a look at the dishonorable mentions. Now, I saw a lot of movies this year. Yeah, 85 to be precise. I saw not all of these films will make it onto the list. However, that doesn't change the fact that they're not that good either. And in order of how I would have put them on the list from number 20 to number 11, then they are Film of the Unicorn. A film that had pretty good animation, but not... But if only the writing and characters could have been in as good as well. Now, Gladiator 2. I wasn't used on the first Gladiator, and while I'd say this is a minor improvement, I highly doubt I'll remember this one. A Family Affair. There was some potential with this one, but it only led it to be one of the most meh rom-coms I've ever seen. In Wolves, the dynamic between the main two actors is pretty good, for the most part. But I barely found a story within this. Bob Marley, One Love. I can definitely see the appeal of these musical biopics but this film barely offered enough for me to get interested in Bob's life. Joker Folia do. I wouldn't say it's as bad as many other people say, but as I wasn't huge on the first Joker, I'd say it's not much of an improvement. When Woodpecker goes to camp, it's a huge improvement compared to the first film. But only felt like a black and old kids film. The Ministry of Ungentlemen and Warfare. The film I've pretty much forgot everything about. So next hit pick a really cool idea for an animated feature that ended up being incomplete. Why Ace didn't just after pretty black and kids flick. And finally, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Yeah, the nostalgia elements aren't too bad, and that were pretty decent. So, but the movie it was like a huge downgrade from Afterlife. And the number one worst film of 2024 is Rebel Moon Part 2, The Scargiver. And when the first Rebel Moon came out at the end of 2023, it was pretty bad. And it felt like Zack Snyder did an attempt to make Star Wars only failed. But with Part 2, you have no idea how much they messed this up. The story is pretty dull. The visuals, well, okay. I don't make this movie look that great, and the characters barely have enough personality. It seems like a typical It seems like a typical sci-fi film, and that's pretty bad. Wouldn't that make it a little higher on this list? Well, here's the reason why this is the number one worst film of the year. It's absolutely boring. I mean, I'll give it with some of the other films on the list. Is that they did have moments there well aren't good. I won't say I'll get right away. And I did get quite interested. But man, this film feels so slow that it's technically a few minutes shorter than the original. It feels a few hours longer. Especially when it's dragged into these characters' backstories where I didn't care about any of them. And when a film doesn't make me care about any of its characters, that's when you know there's a huge problem. Now granted, I have heard that the directors of both the first part and the second part are huge improvements. Like, they're not technically good movies. But if Zack went through with them, they would have left into some film films that were just pretty meh. But I haven't got around to seeing those. And even if those turned out to be fine, it wouldn't change the huge Scott Oz that was left on a film that was this dull over me. Rebel Moon Part 2, The Scargiver, the number one worst film of 2024. Whew, glad I'm done with the worst list. Now I've got to look at 20 anti-film films that not only made 2024 or a great year, but the type of films that when they were good, they were some of the best films that the decade had to offer. Stay tuned for that video. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to comment, like, and subscribe, and I will see you next time.